You're listening to AM Natchitoches on 1450 KNOC.
Welcome back to the program. This is Joe. Just got done speaking with the new president and CEO and the chairperson of the Chamber of Commerce here in Natchitoches, Tony Davis and Roger Cunningham, respectively. Now we have our state representative, Rick Nowlin, joining us. Good morning. How are you, sir?
Good morning, Joe.
Glad to have you in the studio. Nice. It's always a pleasure to see you whenever you get a chance to come by town.
Oh, I love to come. Anytime you would allow me, I'd be happy to come back too. Well,
we're always happy to have you on. Now, as we were discussing during the break, one of the big things in Louisiana has been the budget. The state budget that we came out with a few months back, and some people not very happy about that. You were recently here in town. Our state treasurer, Mr. Kennedy, was in, and you were kind of in with him at the it was the Kiwanis Club meeting, and he had some ideas and he had some concerns with the budget, and you kind of shared some of those concerns.
That's correct. You know, we made some cuts this year. Some of them I agreed with. Some that maybe I didn't agree with. In fact, if you check the record when the final budget came back from the Senate, you'll find I was one of 34 House members that did not vote for the budget because of some of the changes made in the last hours of the session. But Kennedy has pointed out some things that a number of us in the House and the Senate have already identified as possible sources of cuts. You know, we've got to maintain critical services. We've got to protect higher education and health care. And the sad fact is, of the $26 billion budget, only about $7.7 billion of that is state general fund, and of that only 30% is discretionary and non-discretionary. And I don't want to swamp people with numbers, but it boils down to, when you get down to cutting money, you're actually cutting higher ed and health care, because that's the two biggest items you can cut that's not already protected by the Constitution or existing statute. So we've got to make some changes in that direction and do a few other things too.
Now, as a student, the cuts to higher education really does concern. And this is my last semester here at Northwestern. I plan on going to graduate school starting in the spring. But these cuts to higher education plus the GRAD Act adding more money that we as students have to pay, it really seems like we're being treated unfairly. Are there other items that could have been cut that would have kind of helped ease the tension on higher education?
Well, absolutely. I'll give you an example. And I had a little off-the-floor debate with some of my colleagues from the New Orleans metro area. The budget, for one item, there was a $500,000 item in there for some improvements or repairs to a park. And I said, if we take that $500,000, apply it to health care, we get a 4-to-1 match or $2 million from the Fed, so the $500,000 becomes $2.5 million. Well, then that's money for health care that we don't have to come up with from other sources, which then could be shifted to higher education. And that's just one small example. We have got to do more. One of the things Kennedy mentioned, as you may recall, was the high number of state employees per population, 10,000 population. We're well above the southern average and the national average. And we've got to address that also. We're not talking about laying people off or firing people, but what we're talking about is trying to be more efficient and not replacing everyone that retires necessarily or that leaves for other reasons.
And I think his proposal was 5,000 jobs a year over the next 3 years, which would save us it would save us quite a few $100 million, I believe.
He's estimated $500 million a year. I think that would be probably the first year savings, and it would compound each year as you go forward.
Well, that sounds like an impressive amount of money to save, and considering, I think NSU here in town has lost almost $10 million over the last couple of years and is looking for another $10 to $15 million cuts in the next couple of years. That sounds like it's really helpful.
Well, we're looking at, I think in round numbers, Northwestern has $11 million in its current year budget that is one-time money or federal stimulus money or different one-time monies that we've got to replace in order to avoid it. I'm hopeful we can replace a lot of it. I'm not sure we'll be able to replace all of it.
What do you see as one of the biggest things the legislature has to address in the coming months?
Other than the budget?
Other than the budget,
Okay, because that is by far and away the number one item, and it's going to be a real battle. Senator Long and I are looking forward to it. We're ready for it. We've already been working together to do our homework and working with others on what we can do. The next biggest item, of course, next year is reapportionment. We expect to have the census data by second week, certainly mid-February. The House and Government Affairs Committee and the Senate and Government Affairs Committee will look at that whole committee meetings, and I expect a whole lot of legislators to be sitting in on those meetings because that's the committee that's going to recommend the map to the full bodies. And after they meet for 3 or 4 weeks, I anticipate a special session call just for that one issue. We would probably then adopt it in a special session, whatever map, and I expect many amendments, and then submit it to the Justice Department. They need at least 90 days, so we've got to get that done in March or early April at the latest, and then submit it to them so that we can get their response back in July, hopefully, so we can then possibly have a second special session to make any changes they require and then go forward with the qualification. We got elections this fall, and so it's going to be very tight, and if the budget issue wasn't there, this one's certainly going to flash some tempers because you're redrawing district lines.
And this is Joe in with our State Representative Rick Nowlin. You did show me your notes. The two big things on your notes was the budget and reapportionment. Were you writing your notes on graphing paper there?
Well, yeah, it's my engineering notepad here. I mean, once a geek, always a geek. I don't know what it is, but
that's. If anything could use a good bit of engineering, I think it would be government at this point. Looking at the thing this past weekend, of course, we had elections, and there were 2 state amendments on there, and one of those was changing legislative sessions in the fall. Can you discuss that a little?
Yeah, what that is, that moves the sessions up in the spring by 2 weeks. We start 2 weeks earlier, we get out 2 weeks earlier. So instead of getting out in late June, we'll get out in the middle of June instead of starting in either mid-March or end of March or end of April. Whichever year it is, it'll be 2 weeks earlier. There was some sentiment for starting it actually 30 days earlier so that the session would end the end of May. Those legislators, not me, but those that have small children would then have the full summer with their children, take care of other activities. But there was some concern that the starting a full month earlier would squeeze us too much time between New Year's Day and the start of the session to get some pre-session committee meetings. And there are a lot of those that go on. So we compromised it 2 weeks, and I was glad to see that pass.
Now, for the budgetary sessions, does that take off some of the pressure of you guys trying to pass this before, in the last hour?
Not really, although we're limited in the amount of non-budgetary bills we can offer during the budgetary sessions like coming up in 2011. The pressure is always there. It seems like that by the time the Appropriation Committee gets through with the budget, they take the governor's budget and make some changes, fine-tune it. It's still essentially the governor's budget with some changes by the House, and then it goes to the Senate for further changes. And as for example, this year we got the budget back. It was on Friday night, it was roughed out. Saturday, we had an idea. We got it back on Sunday for a vote, and Monday was the last day. So the last 3 days of the session, you're going to get the budget. You're going to have an idea earlier, but you're not sure to the last days.
Now, from the time that the budget leaves the governor's desk to the time that it comes back to you guys from the Senate, how much had it changed this year?
I would say, well, it's all relative. Probably 80% of the budget was intact. The governor has a lot to say, and of course, if you're going to make a change to the budget, you've got to be able to defend it and show where the money's coming from or where the money is going to be expended. And then you've got to get a sufficient number of your colleagues on both sides of the Capitol to agree with it. So there's a lot of fine tuning, but there are very few major changes.
Okay, and once again, we talked about one of the issues here was the use of the different fund, the rainy day fund, the surf fund, and things like that, and those seem to cause a little bit of controversy throughout the state. In fact, there in South Louisiana, I think there's a lawsuit against the use of the rainy day funds. But the bigger problem here, as you mentioned, is the fact that we use the majority of these funds this year. When next year comes around, what are we going to do?
Yeah, we use the majority of the SURF, the State Emergency Relief Fund, for hurricane relief and other disasters, and puts us in a real bind. We're going to be, if we have any major hurricane disasters, that sort of thing, we could be shorthanded and underfunded this year. The rainy day fund, we're restricted to using no more than 1/3 of the fund in any year. We'd used some the prior year, and that I think the lawsuit deals with whether we could do it 2 consecutive years. There's some a little bit of difference between the Constitution and the statutes. The House, I think, based its opinion on the Constitution, and I think the other side on on statutes, and I'm not saying either side is right or wrong. It's just it's got to be resolved, and I'm anxious to see how it comes out.
And we've got a couple minutes left. Is there anything? When's the next session start?
Next session is supposed to start the third Monday in April.
And
but we'll be starting much earlier than that. We'll have committee meetings in February. I anticipate a special session, as I said earlier, in March to address reapportionment.
And are there any items that you would like, any bills that you'd like to get passed through, and hopefully that would be good for this area?
Yeah, I am, but I'd rather present that on another day. That in addition to getting your bills drafted in the right manner, the timing is also of significance. And before I lay anything out, I'd like to make sure I'm rounding up support from my colleagues. And then, of course, although Senator Long and I have been discussing a few items already, we always want to try to be on the same page for those items for our local interest.
Absolutely. In terms of the Natchitoches area, just you love to come to town. I see you all the time. What are some of the things that you would really, not just in terms of what you'd like to get in a bill, but what would you just like to see changed in Natchitoches?
Well, let me tell you, I love Natchitoches. I live here by choice. I've lived other places, although my family was originally from Flora. And I think we're doing well. There's some people hurting here, no doubt about it. Especially in some of the retail shops. We've had reductions in force at our local industries. We've got to be very concerned about that, certainly at Northwestern. So while I'm positive on Natchitoches, and I think relative to other parts of the state, we're doing relatively well if you can look at it in that positive light. But I think that we've just got to continue to pull together. I'm really excited about Tony. I know Nick did a great job at the chamber, but I think we've got a good man to replace him, and I think we'll go forward there. I just think that we need to take every opportunity we can to present Natchitoches to the state and the world, because we're a great place to live and for business to locate. And one of my objectives is to make sure we support the local businesses as much as we try to recruit new ones.
All right. Well, once again, Representative Rick Nowlin, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Is there anything you'd like to add before we have to go?
No, I'm just want the people to know that I appreciate very much the opportunity they've given me to serve them, and I want them to contact me with any concern they have. My phone number is 357-7048. Please call Mary Frances Jones there at the office, and if I'm not there, she will get a hold of me.
Thank you very much for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you in, as always, sir. You can check out this and other news clips online at www.1450knocradio.com by clicking on the archive tab, which will take you to our KNOC page.